This episode of FanGeeks Roadshow is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to discuss all things Robert Picardo. Roadshow viewers will have brought in about a dozen works from the Doctor, as well as a few limited edition Zimmermans that we'll be auctioning off later in the show. You'll find the format of the show fairly simple. We discuss all the characters' appearances in the game Star Trek timelines one at a time, and then the episode of Star Trek that they come from. At the end of discussing each version of the doc, our lovely panel of experts will give us an auction price ranging from 1 to 10 bars of gold-pressed latinum based on how well the character and timelines cues to the episode, how representative it is, etc. So to kick things off, enough talking, our lovely panel of experts will each have 60 seconds, more talking, to characterize the essence of Robert Picardo's character, the Doctor. Remember that I'll be timing you each 60 seconds, but I do not, in fact, have any sort of timepiece. Who is the Doctor? Captain Idle. Your 60 seconds begins now.
The Doctor to me is not a man, but a machine made to look like a man. It is the personification of caregiver without giving a care in the world, or as much as his programming will allow. It is the definition of confused life stumbling his way through this world of unknowns and unexpected events whilst being confined to one room, at least in the early season. And I think I related to a lot of the Doctor with myself in that, like, you know, there are things you don't understand. There are things about life you have to work out on the fly. And that very much, you know, personifies the Doctor's journey for me, especially from, you know, start to season 7, where he goes from just turned on to help with a medical problem and discarded by the crew to being respected and, you know, championed for rights for his kind and being a hero for his, essentially for his race that he personifies. And I believe that's probably 60 seconds. Do I lose points if I have time on the clock?
No, we'll roll it over to the next episode. Okay. Skycap, who is
oh my gosh.
the Doctor?
Well, you all know I love Voyager. You can't love Voyager and not love the Doctor. But I submit you can't hate Voyager and not love the Doctor. Everybody loves him, even Tsunkatsu Siete. He's a crank, but he's lovable. He gets along with everybody by hating everybody. He's a data type character, so he can go on all kinds of missions with his mobile emitter or not, go into the holodeck, make first contact, save the day when flesh and blood humanoids would be completely incapacitated. The Doctor, he's your man.
Man for all seasons. Now I see Stars rubbing his insect parts together. So, Stars and Garters, in 60 seconds, who is the Doctor?
So I find the Doctor really, really interesting, not just because of the really combative and initially antagonistic character type that he kind of personifies, but also because he's a really interesting meta-narrative within Star Trek, where Star Trek was originally all about robots and androids, and then TNG happened, and suddenly it's all about holograms and this all new form of sentient life. And even more than anything, like in DS9 with Vic Fontaine, like Voyager really started to get into the nitty-gritty of what is a hologram. Is this a simulacrum of life? Is this actually sentient life that we are, you know, selfishly utilizing for our own needs? And they took that interesting philosophical question, they attacked it from multiple different angles, and they said, okay, cool. What if we made him kind of an arsehole, so you were like, well, maybe you should be an appliance? And that's the kind of the great contradiction in the Doctor's character, is that he's a really great philosophical vehicle for all the Star Trek moral quandaries, like Data, like Spock, but he's an arsehole, so you get to attack it from a different angle, and that's the great fun of it. And getting to see that development, arguably, he is one of the single most developed characters, not just on Voyager, which is, you know, a bit infamous for a lack of development of certain characters, but also in all of Star Trek.
Thank you for eating up the rest of Idle's 60 seconds with that. Okay, our first piece was manufactured for the game's launch in 2016. It comes with a certificate of authenticity, which reads, equipped with a 29th century mobile holo emitter, this EMH was no longer restricted in movement. As, of course, the legendary mobile Doctor. A couple fun facts. He was the #1 med base at the game's launch, even though he ain't now. And he's also involved in making a fusion card, who we will not be talking about in this episode. That's more of a 7 variant, so we'll save that for future installment. Captain Idle, talk to me about Mobile Doctor.
I mean, I wasn't there at the game's launch. I played the time when you saw him in a Behold before Cheesecake came along, you saw Mobile Doctor and you just went, no, I will not have that, for skills and for anything else. But for the sum of his parts of what he became, he actually became a lot more useful. And then they started adding more med to faction missions and giving EMH more events. He became slightly more useful. I'm not a big book alum from back the days, so I'm sure you guys will speak more about his actual usefulness at the time, but all I can speak to is how I used him, which was pretty much never as a card. As a representative of the moment, it does sort of feel like a generic Doctor variant as opposed from a specific reason. So if you were to say, hey, here's the card and this represents the Doctor rather than from a specific episode, it serves the purpose. The art does the job, representing the kind of the old style of DB's at the times art style with the heavy shading on the left and the right.
So
the interesting thing is that so obviously he gets his mobile emitter in Future's End part. I believe it's in part 2. He gets the actual mobile emitter. But this variant isn't recognizably from that episode, because if you're thinking of Doctor moments from that, it's when he's being shown how to experience pain by Starling, or when he's out and about and being called, Leisure Suit Larry by Rain Robinson, or when he's tanking hits from far-right Doomsday Preppers and saving Chakotay and Torres. Like, there's a lot of moments from Future's End that are fairly iconic for the Doctor, but this is just kind of a generic variant, which is something that Disruptor Beam used to do a lot. It was a case of, this is the character, just as it was. And sometimes you could pick out where they'd come from, but most of the time it was just, this is the character, and they're not usually aligned with specific moments. So the only reason why we call him, Mobile Doc and Future's End is because that's the first time he was like that. And that is a pretty landmark episode for the Doctor. Maybe not the most important, but is certainly a change in direction for the show, where he starts to be able to go out and about, not just on the odd holodeck mission, which is, that's a hard thing to write consistently for every season. Otherwise, Robert Picardo gets very, very bored. But there's tons of cool things you can do with a mobile emitter, and I really want to know what happened to it when they got back to Earth. I don't know if anyone's ever going to answer that because it's a sticky issue, but yeah, no, Mobile Doctor. I think
it's part of him, really. That would be part of his body, so that would be sort of the essence of the Doctor himself. So you might campaign to say, it's like my shirt, I need it to go out. I can't go out without a rain jacket. I'm not going anywhere without my mobile emitter. This is mine. So I imagine nothing was done to it other than maybe someone looked and went, no, that's cool, and then walked away.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about that episode's from season 3, Future's End. It's a two-parter.
In a howdy-doody kind of way.
Voyager. It's one of those great time travel. We just go back in time and have fun with
the Eugenics Wars. What are Eugenics Wars?
Yeah.
Look,
Henry
it's
Starling.
a really fun episode in a howdy-doody kind of way.
Yeah.
Oh, classic mid-90s, amazing guest stars. Yeah, just you just go with it. You just strap in and watch it for an hour and a half or whatever.
Like most of Voyager. Just strap in, you go for a wild ride.
It's a two-part episode, but Doc is only in one scene in the first episode where Henry Starling abducts him, turns him on, makes him feel pain for the first time. So for only having one scene in the episode, that sticks out in my mind.
I suppose that's the difference between the EMH and Data. When Data met the Borg Queen, she kind of brought him to near climax. When the EMH, he has pains. It just shows the audience at the time, doesn't it? Wow, that killed
I do remember watching that.
Sorry.
I do remember watching
I'll leave that fetish out there for everyone to appreciate.
The first time I watched the episode as a kid was, it kind of blew my mind because, like you talked about, we're exploring holograms, but we know they don't feel pain, they don't feel emotion, this kind of stuff. So for him to experience that for the first time was like, oh, wow, something like that sort of really set the stage for Starling as a bad guy because he's inflicting pain on someone who's not even supposed to be able to feel pain.
Yeah, no, it's Starling is a interesting character. It's really weird seeing Star Trek's approach to the tech billionaire go backwards and forwards. You have Discovery's very dated references to Elon Musk, versus the way that they treat Henry Starling, and it's interesting seeing those attitudes go back and forth.
He's a regular Bill Gates.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, I suppose, at the time. I obviously I can't speak for it because I was probably like 2 years old at the time. I imagine it was a bit more subversive at the time to have a character like Starling be so blatantly evil and destroying trucks in broad daylight and kidnapping people. I mean, I
think I remember
Elon Musk now, but
I remember watching it at the time, and I think I remember at the time I found him quite cheesy, and I went, "Oh, he's obviously the kind of when it coming to that realization in my life is like, oh, these are the obvious bad guys. These are like obviously they're moustache twirling, and I was kind of disengaged at that point, kind of going, well, yeah, okay, he could have been a bit better. I was a bit disappointed with Henry Starling. I was more interested in Braxton in the character as an antagonist in that episode, or sort of.
Okay, so a few words from Robert Picardo about this episode. He initially didn't like the idea of a mobile emitter. He said, I was concerned about the portable holographic emitter because I didn't want to mess with a winning combination. The audience seemed to embrace the Doctor's character during the show's first seasons, and so much of his character is based on the notion that he's severely limited and has to cope with those limitations, such as the fact he can only exist in sickbay or the holodeck, and that he's different to an organic being. So it seemed to me that if we took the risk of making him more like everyone else, we were damaging part of his uniqueness. Fortunately, that didn't seem to be the case. I'm very happy that I was wrong about the mobile emitter. So we come to the time now where we get to let everyone know. We're going to flash it at the bottom of the screen. How many bars of gold pressed platinum would you give this character for attention to detail, how well the card is constructed, and how well it sort of reminds you of the episode? Captain Idol, 1 to 10, how many bars of gold pressed platinum?
Gosh, well, overall, 6. I'll put in 6 for this. It's not perfect. It's not ideal. But it's there and it's functional. Could have a bit more power in this kind of day and age, but hey, it there and it serves the function of saying, here is the mobile doctor. You can collect him now. Look.
Skycap, how many bars of platinum?
Yeah, I do really like the old school art and how, the crew in those days could just be the person and not necessarily like a really, really highly specific, like episode specific variant. I'm looking at him right now on my phone. Just the fact that he just kind of is most useful as a cheesecake component these days than an actual card. I think
just mix him with a little butter, mash up some biscuits. Stick him in the oven for 20 degrees on 180 degrees for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'll pay 3 bars for this guy for kind of nostalgia's sake.
Wait, do I have a limit amount of platinum? Have I got a pool?
Gold press platinum.
How much have I got?
10, right?
No. Oh, okay. I'm
1 to 10 for each character.
Oh, okay. I'm just rating. Right, fine.
I mean, the fact that my takeaway from that episode is mostly about the technology more so than the character, I think doesn't help. Yeah, 3 bars.
Yeah. For me, it'd probably be about 4 bars of platinum. It's mostly because of while it is neat to have a non-specific variant of a character, so that it's just like, look, it's just them in their entirety. The fact that they have the mobile emitter means that it is specifically a Doctor from around this time period. And when I think mobile emitter, I think, oh, Future's End. That's immediately what I think of, even though the pose doesn't immediately. But the power isn't there. Even when I joined the game, Mobile Doctor was considered antiquated, and he only jumped up in value because, as I say, he's a pathway to a better card, who is also, in many ways, part of a better Doctor episode, because, like you say, Future's End is kind of about the Doctor, but it's kind of about other things. It's kind of a 90s time travel thing. There's just a lot going on, and it doesn't
1 to
have
10 bars of gold pressed platinum.
4 out of 10 bars of gold pressed platinum. That is all I will pay for the Mobile Doctor.
We need to get that 60-second curfew.
No, I'm here. You can't get it.
Okay, our next piece was also manufactured for the Timeline's launch in 2016. You can see the name engraved on the shaft of his putter, Holonovel Doctor. Now, we're going to discuss both this piece and Author Doctor, as they are ostensibly from the same episode. A couple interesting facts about Holonovel Doc. He has incorrect art. He is from a holo program with a really bad comb-over that doesn't show up. But the fact that we know he is from the episode Author is that he has a scoundrel trait, and in fact his ID in the game is EMH_author_crew. So we can guess that he is actually from that episode. So we'll throw it to Stars and Garters this time. Talk to me about Holonovel Doc, the super rare crew.
So, as I recall, this is a pretty poor crew. I remember way back when I first started in the game, it's like, oh, a bit of med, because God knows you need it when you're first starting out in the game. And then he was very quickly equipped by a crew that had, many other attributes like a third skill, collections, event use, accurate art. These are the things I care about in my cards. It's not a bad likeness, like even though it is missing a few essential details to mark it out as a specific variant. But I don't know, like Picardo is very good at playing a sleaze, as you can see from Author when he experiences Paris's version of Photons Be Free, and this captures that scurrilous, oh god, you're dripping with oil, like kind of feel. But it's just a pretty poor card overall. Like Med 2 skill is never a fun piece, but he's got a bit of flavor to him. He's not the worst. I don't want to say that he's necessarily the worst Doctor variant, but he could be. I don't know. I'll have to see how many bars of Platinum I'll pay for him after we've talked a bit more about him.
Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the episode first and then swing back to his other variant. This is a Season 7 episode called Author, in which the Doctor flexes his authoric muscles, I don't think that's a word, creating a controversial holonovel, which is heavily based on the Voyager crew and depicts him in a terrible light. When he tries to get his publisher to stop the release of his holo program, they refuse, saying he's not a real person. It's a Measure of a Man-esque court battle ensues in the last 10 minutes of the episode. This thing is packed full of references. You get Brote and Forrester, the name of the publisher. They did the Dixon Hill series. They did about a dozen callbacks to previous Voyager episodes when they are testifying for Doc. You hear about the Vedic song, The Occupation of Bajor, the 12th Guarantee, which is similar to the 7th Guarantee from the episode The Drumhead in TNG. So they basically, you can tell it was a labor of love for some big Star Trek nerd to call back all these different things. And of course, it's an homage to The Measure of a Man from TNG, where they'd have to decide if Data is a real person or not. So, Sky, talk to me about this episode. How does it rank for you in terms of Voyager episodes?
It's way up there. It's because it manages to be weighty and have a lot, give you a lot of food for thought. While also the holodeck program is just really, really fun. And seeing the Doctor kind of put the crew through their paces and try to turn the tables on them is just really satisfying. So yeah, I think it's a really great sequel, if you will, to Measure of a Man. This particular crew doesn't stand out to me from that episode, and I don't know. I would rather, if we were going to have somebody from this episode, maybe the Mark Ones back in the Alpha Quadrant who were mining at the end of it would be like a really interesting sort of adjacent Doctor character.
So we both mentioned Measure of a Man. In fact, the co-writer for this episode included a line of dialogue where Brote says to the Doctor, "You could be the next Karatok or a modern-day Tolstoy." Karatok was the Klingon author who wrote The Gift that Worf gave to Data in Measure of a Man. So they went really deep.
Wow,
in
you were
polls,
not kidding about that. That's cool.
and they slipped so many references into this. Stars, you like this episode? Is it good for you?
I love this episode. It is I feel like I mentioned, Voyager really dives into the holo programs, not just into the ethics of it, but just really going full in on the cheese and the ham. And Bride of Chaotic is an absolute Star Trek classic. Worst Case Scenario is one of my personal favorites, and Author is a good ton of fun, especially because I'm just a sucker for stories about the authorial process. That's why I quite enjoy Muse, or The Muse, whichever version it is, not the crappy DS9 episode, the one with Torres in the play. I just enjoy seeing working through the writing process, and I enjoy seeing the Doctor be a creative force while also being really bad at it. And that all he can think of to do is my own life shifted up 2 or 3 letters, essentially, with Lieutenant Marseille and Lieutenant Torrey and Captain Jenkins. And it's like, these are... Guess what? It's pretty obvious what you're talking about here, Doc. And he's like, well, surely I didn't... It's like, no, you lack that human capacity to recognize you're being a douchebag. And it's fine, but you've got to have a bit more self-awareness about it. But that's part of the fun of the Doctor. I think it does come a bit out of left field that it's this funny episode about, like hurting your companion's feelings, and then suddenly about like 2/3 of the way through the episode, it becomes a court-martial style Samuel T. Cogley type thing. But it handles that well because it's a nice little flip on it. You think that it's going to be just an interpersonal drama, but no, we're actually going to go down the Star Trek, let's have a courtroom episode, and guess what? Trek does courtroom episodes really, really well. And I do enjoy that it is very much a coda to Measure of a Man, but taken in a different enough direction that you're like, this is a sequel and not just a remake.
Could you imagine if Doctor's representative had been a holographic representation of Samuel T. Cogley, like, and they just brought back like found footage of the actor and just brought him in, like, yes, we've got this primitive hologram that's going to represent you.
Nowadays, you got deep breaks, yeah.
yeah, deep breaks.
With all the other references in the episode, that would have kind of been fitting. I agree, Stars. I even wrote down, it feels like they kind of cut 10 to 20 minutes out of a few different episodes and put them together. It feels like an episode and a half, because you also have the storyline of them finally hearing from their family for the first time. They draw lots, and they get to make phone calls home. Harry calls his mom, and she tries to get him promoted by harassing Janeway.
When are you getting promoted?
And then the courtroom stuff only comes in the last 10 minutes. So they could have maybe cut and pasted a few different things and gotten 2 episodes out of it. I don't know. One line, which I loved because I watched all of these ahead, very committed host here. Tuvok says, I have never encountered a replicator, when he's arguing on behalf of the Doctor, says, I've never encountered a replicator that could compose music or paint landscapes or perform microsurgery. Have you? And here we have ChatGPT making artificial paintings and composing music and all the things that they said only Doc could do. So that was funny.
Guess what? You can't always future-proof your science fiction. That's what makes it good science fiction. You're talking about a specific time and specific place.
Well, that actually can be explained away because there was the eugenic wars and then World War III. So pretty much humanity had a technological reset and they just went, fuck it, warp 5.
I suppose it does also kind of get into something I find really interesting about the Doctor, is how much you consider him a life form and how different and how similar he is to humanity. Because the arbitrator at the end is like, well, I can't make a qualified decision. I can qualify that he is, in many ways, a creative force. He is an author. Whether or not he's a sentient being, that's not something I'm really qualified to comment on. And it reminds me a lot of one of my favorite aspects of the new Blade Runner 2049, which was that they introduced another layer of synthetic human to that world, where the original was all about lifelike androids, and then in the sequel it's like, okay, now we have these lifelike androids who are being serviced by another layer of AI who are more similar to Alexa in their complexity, and how much are they real? It's like, well, if replicants are real, why aren't these real? Where does the buck stop? And seeing that conversation play out in Voyager versus TNG, with the conversation between Soong-type androids versus holograms, and then again in Picard they bring up the synthetic life forms. It's really interesting to see science fiction grappling with the exact nature of humanity and what counts and what doesn't, and where you draw the line. So it's kind of cool to see author bring that point up, saying this is a really tangly issue that I can't resolve in a 20-minute episode. We're going to just put a button on that and just come back to this later.
Okay, so before we jump to Author Doctor, let's go ahead and wrap up with a bidding war on Holonovel Doc. Skycap, how many bars of gold press platinum for the comb-overless Holonovel Doc would you put a value on this?
The art is messed up. What's the deal with the traits? He doesn't have athlete. He doesn't have writer. I'm sure there are a ton that are missing. He's a 2-skill, wimpy crew. I don't feel like he's a good representation of the episode that he's in. So I offer 1 bar of gold platinum.
Spicy.
Idle, what about you?
I gotta go for a 1 bar as well. I mean, I'm looking at it now, the artwork. It looks like a it looks like a good cosplay of the Doctor, but a cosplay nonetheless. That is not Robert Picardo in that image. But yeah, no, this isn't a great card. It's This kind of the disappointing thing with super rares at the end of the day is you collect them to collect them. They're never useful, and especially a 2-skiller, and especially with that poor use. And yeah, you're right, he should have writer. His name is literally Holonovel Doctor. Why is he not a writer? Oh, there you go. Yeah, 1.
The stars. I sense that you're about to argue that writer trait, but go ahead.
I'm gonna give 4. I will offer 4 bars of Goldbreast Platinum, mostly because when I first saw him, I was like, "Oh, that's a really good representation of the Doctor from real life." Because I assumed that this was him from when he's like got his fake family and he's going for a drive and he's leaving his wife. And I was like, "Oh, that's a really good representation of that version of the Doctor," and it's not. The fact that his hidden tags specifically say that he is not from the episode I thought he was from, because that made way more sense in my brain. Yeah, this 4 bars. I think it's a decent representation of just how scummy the Doctor could occasionally be. He had a lot of Zimmerman, his creator, in him at times in his interactions with women. He could be very charming, but he could also be a little bit of a creep at times, and especially his fantasies about the 7 and 9 kind of, maybe the less said there, the better. But yeah, it's not a great representation.
Later, don't worry.
It's not the greatest representation of the Doctor, but I think I'm a bit more lenient on it than my co-host. I'll give 4 bars of Goldbreast Platinum.
Okay, from the same episode, author, we have the titular character, Author Doctor. He was manufactured on September 4th, 2017, and if you can notice in his ship battle ability, it's called a single proton flares, when in fact it should be a photon. So someone is ignorant to the inner workings of holograms, and shame on them.
In this
We have
game?
a little bit of a typo there.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't say.
So this is another 2-skiller from the same episode, which is kind of strange, but he is sort of the one who wrote the holo program, and it sort of focuses more on him. And he's got more traits, which is always means more fun. So, Stars, talk to me about this character. Is he enough of an upgrade over the other one? Different enough?
I'd say that he is a much better card overall, most likely because he has Holodeck Enthusiast, which is a much trickier collection to finish. It's not like the skill set is much better, like Dip Med and Med Psi. Like you want the Med base, but he is a better card overall. He's got meteor traits like writer, diplomat. These are helpful in ways, but I feel like it's really hilarious that for an episode that is all about exploring the Doctor and his multifaceted nature and all the things he can be, and the best they can do is two skillers. I mean, you didn't. Okay, I guess that's the tack we're going with this.
Idle, tell me about this shading here, because this is an old card. It's 2017, and he's got the real thick, classic green-blue shading. Is that too much? Are you glad they pulled it back later years, or do you think this makes him stand out?
I don't know. I think it makes him stand out. It was like other people said, I liked when they did that more dramatic shading rather than opposed to them just drawing an outline around the character and one side being blue and the other side being orange. This kind of dramatic style kind of gives the game a little bit more style to it, and that's why I wish they'd stuck with it, because at least you can kind of say, like, yeah, this has got its own almost cell shading in a way. Could be maybe a little bit too much on the bottom of his jacket, but it's a nice jacket. It kind of reminds me of Scrooge Data a little bit, that like sort of just going out in your dressing gown kind of thing. But there's a nice amount of detail paid attention onto the face, and I think it's more evocative of the character than Holonovel Doctor is, definitely.
I do enjoy the arc. They captured that smoking jacket perfectly. It's a really good likeness of that scene, which is really iconic. When I think of this episode, I immediately think of Paris in the holodeck and him with the book. It's like, welcome, dear viewer. Just like complete he might as well be about to open up a book that says Plan 9 from outer space with how much of a ham he's being.
Yeah, and I love the expression that they captured. How you can see what you just said, that you can see it in his face, and you can see how indignant he is in that moment, which really fits the theme of what he's doing. And it's like a very dynamic pose, holding the book and then holding his arm up. So I actually really like the art.
The image for the author episode on Memory Alpha actually has a really cool picture when he's first being like materialized in, and you can see his head is all translucent, and the holodeck is like building him atom by atom. So if they went with an alternate art, I think that would probably be my choice.
That'd be cool.
That sounds really cool.
Okay, Captain Idle, how many bars of gold press latinum for this second variant from the episode?
I'm much more generous. I'll give this a 7. This is seven bars. Okay, the stats aren't great, but what a collection piece. An easy collection piece to fill out, what, 5 collections now? Or, no, sorry, 4 collections. Probably a 5th one there, maybe, in the near future. Please date this podcast as appropriate. Yeah, 2 skiller, but again, we're talking about super rare at this point. He's going to be a shuttle filler and will do the job from that, but he's a collection piece. The art is nice. I'm happy with this being where he sits.
Stars, how many bars of latinum for this fellow?
I would have to concur. For this fine collector's piece, I would offer 7 pieces of gold press latinum. It's a 2 skiller. He's limited. He's old, but he's got the collections that matter. It's a good representation of the moment from the episode. The art is nice and dynamic, like Sky said. It's a strong piece that reminds me of the episode is what I want from Timelines cards, really. It doesn't have to be setting my world on fire. It doesn't have to voyage for me every day for me to like the card and what it represents. And as we've mentioned, there are far worse variants that you can get in this game of this episode.
I don't like the idea of... sorry, go on. I was just going to say, I don't like the idea of the EMH having 2 variants in one episode. Cue the Kirk Van Houten meme. Go on.
Get out of here.
You guys have really convinced me, especially with the point about the collections. Yeah, if you're playing this game for a long time, you know how much marginal use is any crew going to give you. You just got to go with people you like, and this is really nice art. They really stepped up the traits versus Holonovel. Much better representation from the episode. I agree with 7.